So we're going to go straight on and talk about a man who himself is in plenty of danger, and that is Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. He obviously presided over yet another defeat to Leicester. You probably have heard all about it. I'm sure you've read plenty about the miserable afternoon that Red Devils fans faced on Saturday. Mike, he's a man who we've covered before on this podcast plenty of times. When we spoke last about him, we sort of covered that he is far from a tactical genius, but his raison d'etre was to not be that when he came into United. It was to basically rebuild the cultural side of the club. Do you feel as though, take results out of it, do you feel as though he's done that?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's done a good job on that side of things as well. I think he's been fortunate in being allowed to just get on with the job without too much external pressure. I just think it's kind of reaching the point now where all the value to be gained from, regenerating what United are all about behind the scenes, the way they run as a day-to-day operation, and, just all those cultural values. I think they're all in place, and I think all that value's been added now. And we're kind of reaching the point where, okay, how much more tinkering can you do in the day-to-day? How much more can you impart these values on the dressing room and the players, and kind of remind everybody what the club used to stand for under Sir Alex Ferguson? I think there's only so far you can go down that road. And it was, I think we said in the last podcast that this was probably going to be the crunch season now where it comes to a head. And it's going to be, right, okay, this is about delivering results on the pitch now and adding some value to what the team are capable of for 90 minutes on a Saturday, and not just that, those players are playing with the right values. I've got I've got the right day-to-day habits, and that you're taking the pressure off the shoulders, putting it onto the collective rather than any individuals feeling any particular pressure. We've kind of reached that point now, but, the excitement that was generated by the return of Cristiano Ronaldo is kind of just, it's brought about a sense of urgency now. I think United fans want to see a date on the horizon when they're going to be lifting trophies again.
Talking of Cristiano Ronaldo, we'll get more onto sort of Ole and sort of what we expect from him going forward a bit later on. But Ronaldo's return, it's played a big part, obviously, so far this season. And of course, he's already shown that he's a worthy addition. But he's one of those players who is brilliant individually and a mercurial talent. That phrase is almost sort of made for him. But if you're Solskjaer and you're trying to shoehorn him into a team, it feels like a very tricky proposition. Do you think that Ronaldo's arrival may actually have accelerated Solskjaer's potential departure?
Quite possibly, as it's playing out with the early results. I think United had no choice but to go for Ronaldo when he was available. I'm not sure necessarily if, I don't think these decisions generally are made by managers anymore anyway. Football's big business now, so a lot of these big signings are made at executive level. But I don't think Solskjaer would have necessarily wanted Ronaldo, because I think it was, too big an individual to manage. I think he's not about individuals whatsoever. He's about the collective, as we've said. So I think it was a signing that immediately made Solskjaer uncomfortable, and he's shown that he's going to continue to manage United in his own way, in terms of the cultural values and the collective values, and not prioritising the needs of one individual over what might affect other members of the squad. And the fact that Ronaldo's not been a guaranteed starter since he came through the door. So it's kind of accelerated. He's put the spotlight squarely on Solskjaer now and what the decisions he makes. Because I think we can all see Cristiano Ronaldo coming into this United team, and we can see goals. We can see lots of ability behind him. We can see players that don't necessarily always step up, and there's a lack of natural leaders at the top end of the pitch in those big matches. And then you put someone like Cristiano Ronaldo at the top end of that pitch. An absolute out-and-out leader, somebody who's just give me the ball and I'll do the rest. I'll put the finishing touches on everything. And you're just thinking, right, this could be exactly what United need on a football level, on a tactical level, is just simplify it, make it all about Ronaldo, keep the pressure off the shoulders of the build-up players and the playmakers in the team. He just walks into that dressing room and instantly commands respect. So you're thinking this could work quite well. This could just be, as a quick fix solution, this could be the signing that takes United back into, into the realm of lifting trophies and that difference maker on the big occasions. Because I think that's when United have disappointed. They've always, they've picked up some big results in recent years, but always as big underdogs when they weren't particularly fancied. Where, a head-to-head 50-50 type scenario, there's as much at stake for both sides, big 6-pointers and things like that. United have rarely stepped up. They've often disappointed. And now Ronaldo's a signing who can almost drag a lot of those players with him, just instill that winner's mentality in them and take so much on his own shoulders and be the figurehead of the team. But it's obviously something that's not necessarily comfortable, doesn't sit well with the way that Solskjaer likes to manage the club. So we're already beginning to see problems unravel. And it's interesting that Ronaldo, walked off after the way he walked off generated some conversation after the Everton draw, was it? And then Pogba's coming out speaking now after the Leicester defeat. These are individual talents with individual needs who want to be given special treatment. And they're the ones speaking out. And it almost feels like now, it is a case of, the player powers coming back to the fore at Old Trafford. And, Solskjaer's got to come up with some answers. But now we're beginning to wonder how much of the players actually listening to him or believing what he's got to say to them anyway.
So we're assuming that Ronaldo was bought in by somebody else, not Solskjaer particularly, and obviously was sanctioned by the Manchester United hierarchy. Do you think that signing was brought in with a different manager in mind? Because surely they will know. I mean, obviously it's a brilliant commercial opportunity. And as you say, an opportunity that they're not going to miss because the revenue, the interest, the way it will get the fans back and, worldwide interest as well, which is obviously so important to Premier League clubs these days. But surely the hierarchy will have known that this goes against pretty much everything that Solskjaer stands for and everything that Solskjaer has worked on over the last couple of years. So do you think that was brought in, Ronaldo was brought in mind with maybe the switch imminent? Do you think they were picturing another manager in mind? It might not have been a particular one, but do you think they were imagining someone else in the dugout talking to Ronaldo?
Not necessarily. I just think a decision like this was probably made on its own merits. There was a very real possibility that Ronaldo was going to City, at the beginning of that week, at the beginning of that day even. United as a club, if there was any chance that they could stop that happening, you turn in what would be seen as a very big negative into an overwhelming positive, and that's what they've done. And it's a bit of a no-brainer, really, as a business opportunity. Managers have to manage whatever cards they're dealt at that level. We have to remember that as much as Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's had this job on his own terms for 2 or 3 years, he's not managing a bottom half championship club. He's managing a top 6, top 4 Premier League club with everything that goes with it. And sometimes you just have to, even when there was talk of Cristiano Ronaldo going to City, there's quotes that have surfaced that Guardiola was essentially saying, I don't really know how he's going to fit into my team. There was at no stage was there no question that I wouldn't accept him, because if the club say that we need Cristiano Ronaldo, these are realities of managing a top 4 team, a Champions League team. There are some decisions that are made above your head and you've got to work around them. So, like we say, I think it's that word, it's accelerating the process. I don't think necessarily when United signed Ronaldo, it was, right, we're now taking steps towards replacing Solskjaer. It's just, I guess it was more a case of, well, let's see how he copes with this then. Because if he is the real deal, if he is going to take us to the next level, well, this is one way to prove it. This is just, let's speed up the process and find out where this goes. Because it's clear where we are right now and where United have fallen short in the last year or so. Ronaldo is a potential short-term fix to a lot of those problems. So it's up to a manager to make that work. And, that's a position we find ourselves in. As it turns out, we're already beginning to see some cracks surface in terms of Solskjaer's approach and trying to fit Ronaldo into it, how it all fits into the overall scheme of things. So I think more than anything, it is accelerating things. My initial suspicion was we might find ourselves in a scenario where, because we're so many of us are already aware that Solskjaer's tactical side of the game is probably his biggest shortcoming. I was anticipating the possibility that as the season goes on, we begin to see a situation unfold where Ronaldo's almost effectively managing the team on a tactical level, or certainly at the top end of the pitch, where everybody's just doing what Ronaldo says, and all of those players are supporting him, and it's all about feeding him to put the finishing touches on everything. But then if Ronaldo's not even playing to begin with sometimes, and he's not getting the minutes that he would like, then even that's not necessarily a possibility. And I say that, I don't even think that's necessarily a bad thing. If that's, Solskjaer's skill set is not necessarily a tactical skill set, and he's happy to take a step back, because it does appear as though he's left the players at the top end of the pitch to their own devices a lot in terms of how United as an attacking force go about their business. I don't really see much input coming from Solskjaer. So that's just not a natural next step, isn't it? That Ronaldo then starts telling the players around him how he wants them to play, and kind of almost, through just collaborating with each other, they then strike upon their formulas at the top end of the pitch. So, but, if Ronaldo's not even getting the minutes, then that's not necessarily going to be a solution.
Let's move the spotlight off Ronaldo and back onto Solskjaer. So our Ole Gunnar Solskjaer episode, which was recorded, it was right at the back end of last season, sort of start of summer. I think it was June-ish. So it's not that far down the feed, Mike, but plenty has obviously changed since then. But going back to him as a manager, as a human, as an individual, there was a really good article, I think it was on The Athletic actually, in which they spoke to a childhood friend of his. They spoke to a mentor of his as well, and someone who trained alongside him as well and got their coaching badges. And they all sort of said he's from a village in Norway, which is renowned for its hard work, for people who just dig in, get on with things, don't complain. They all pride themselves on working really hard for earning absolutely everything that they've got. And we spoke about the fact that he's instilling these qualities, especially in the young players, because there's plenty coming through at United and have done under his watch. Do we think that, Solskjaer, with his skill set and with those values and those morals and the way he wants players to sort of almost mirror his own hard-working stance, do we think that, say he's not in this role for much longer, do we think another role at the club will come about? Do we think maybe working with younger players, maybe a job at the higher level in terms of going upstairs? Or do we think he'd still want another crack at being a head coach somewhere else, perhaps in England, perhaps in Norway, perhaps further afield?
I think a backroom job at Old Trafford's more likely, on two levels, really. First of all, because, he's clearly dedicated a hell of a lot to the club. He's instilled in the club. He's in that job because of what he knows about Manchester United, not because of what he knows about football management. Which is not to downplay his achievements in Norway, for example. But we talk about this being a cultural rebuild. An interesting question for me is, you ask almost anybody who supports a club in the Championship or even down into League One, would you swap your manager with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer? And there wouldn't be an awful lot of people that a heartbeat would drop their manager to take Solskjaer in the dugout next week. So that kind of speaks volumes in and of itself, He knows he's sometimes a club just needs time to breathe. And I think Manchester United became that club where they were reacting to everything. They were going through a succession of big name managers who were past their best. They were spending money, breaking transfer fees, just trying to keep up with the likes of City and Liverpool and just try to stay at the top table. They were grasping a lot, and there was just a lot of overreactionary type behaviour in a lot of the decision-making that they made, and they just needed time to breathe. And Solskjaer came in this interim role, and the club just took a step back and then started to slowly but surely do things properly again, the way that they used to be done. And because of Solskjaer's profile as a club legend, as a player, and an iconic figure, and the fact that, yes, he had some managerial experience, he hadn't worked on the television for Sky, or he'd never been put in uncomfortable situations to badmouth any of the players or criticise anybody at the club. He was just this totally neutral figure that understood the entire culture of the club, had all factions on side, media figures, supporters, players within the dressing room when he walked in already remember him from when they played alongside him. So he couldn't have had it any better. He was the perfect neutral figure. And just by being that profile, enabled him to just come in and do the job at his own pace, concentrate on the things that he felt he wanted to concentrate on and needed to concentrate on to get United back to what they were in terms of a day-to-day operation. So they've had that period now, but eventually, it comes to a point where you have to start showing the other sides of the game, and this is the crunch. I think it was always destined to be that season. I just never thought we'd be in October asking these questions already so soon.
If he is to hand over the reins in the next few weeks, maybe before the next international break, I think he'll leave with plenty of goodwill, despite the recent run of results, because of his club lending status. But do you think the longer he holds on, the longer that they don't make the change, and the longer that United maybe crash out of Europe, sink down the table, perhaps go out the FA Cup, perhaps just generally struggle to find their feet, do you think that goodwill from supporters will start to dissipate? Do you think now is probably a good time with plenty of credit still in the bank?
I think it will just naturally run its own course. I don't think there'll be any real mutiny around his departure if it is going to come. I think, his status will never be lost, in terms of scoring that winning goal in the Champions League final in '99 and, everything that went around that and what that means for the whole identity of the club. So I don't think any of that's in any real danger. What we need to differentiate is, it's the difference between stability and glory is, what Solskjaer has brought to the club is stability. He's brought it back. United desperately needed stability. But as a club, they can't function for too long without tasting glory. And it's a completely different, it's a different game altogether than just organising a workplace to function better and be the workplace it's supposed to be on a day-to-day level, but then going and winning trophies against elite clubs across Europe is, you require something entirely different. So the job has been a success on the level of stability. I'm not convinced Solskjaer will ever be the manager that can deliver glory to those United fans, though.
Yeah, it seems unlikely, doesn't it? So in terms of a replacement then, obviously we don't know when this will be. We suspect it might be at some point this season, perhaps as we edge towards Christmas. Mike, you had some thoughts about who might be the ideal candidate to replace him. In fact, you sent me two who you thought would be the ideal candidates. One is in work and one is out of work. What do you reckon? Who would be stepping up?
Yeah, well, this is a conversation that's relatively fresh in the memory from, I was away with the United fan a couple of weeks ago, and this was kind of, a big part of the conversation we had. And yeah, there's two names for me that stand out. And it's always the same question when any manager leaves a club: do you want change or do you want continuity? And I tend to try to think, right, imagine both scenarios. Now, if you want continuity from what Solskjaer has built in terms of the culture, in terms of the day-to-day values, I think Diego Simeone, if United can go and break the bank, and he's been at Atletico Madrid a long time now, whenever he chooses the time to leave, I don't think necessarily the club would stand in his way, given everything that he's achieved, if it's to go to another country and stuff like that. I think Diego Simeone, given the fact that he's got no previous with any English clubs whatsoever, I think he walks into Old Trafford and would get the full backing of all the support. And I think they would be buying into him, no problem whatsoever, because he's a fierce competitor. He's somebody, you see the way he gets the Atletico Madrid fans up, where, to roar on the team like they've got a part to play. I can imagine him on the touchline getting all, getting the fans to start generating atmosphere when it goes quiet at Old Trafford. And I think that the hardcore United fans would lap it up, would love it. And I just think he's shown absolutely that he's capable of winning the very biggest trophies and, getting to Champions League finals with Atletico Madrid twice with the resources that he had. There's absolutely no doubting. Yeah, he's very much of the same principles as Solskjaer. It's just that even though he's not got a variety of ways that he goes about things tactically, he is very cautious and defensive-minded initially. It's always on that solid foundation, which is kind of what United's best successes under Solskjaer have been. But I do think Simeone's got a lot more going on in terms of routes to goal, how to unhinge a particular opposition on any given day, where where your key areas are on a pitch, and getting players to step up on really big occasions and really deliver 8, 9, 10 out of 10 performances, and a collective, a whole that's greater than the sum of its parts. I mean, these are ticking all boxes that you're thinking about what's not quite happening for Solskjaer, and you're just thinking, yeah, Simeone pretty much ticks all of the boxes without throwing away the culture. If you're thinking more short term and talking about bringing the best out of your assets at a business level, you're talking about Paul Pogba and Cristiano Ronaldo. And this wouldn't be for me personally. I think Paul Pogba is probably a player that United really do need to get rid of. The fact that he's coming out and speaking up now, he's seizing his opportunity. He knows his opportunities now to really ramp up the pressure and do these interviews and say some of the things he's saying that really turn the pressure on Solskjaer. But nonetheless, he is an asset. He's a player that can win big matches. Cristiano Ronaldo. Zinedine Zidane, for me, is a manager who's out of work, who has shown an ability. And I see a lot of likenesses between this Manchester United team now and the Real Madrid team that won 3 consecutive Champions League titles, in so much that, there's a structure there. There's a solid sort of back 4, back 5, back 6, however you want to look at it. And then there's a collection of individuals towards the top end of the pitch. And it's about trying to find a system that brings out the best in those individuals and making sure that everybody's happy, basically. Everybody's feeling good within themselves to go out on the biggest occasions and just deliver, with no excuses, because every little whim's been catered for. And now it's the big occasion. Now you go out and step up for me. And that's what Zidane was an absolute master at with Real Madrid. I remember, is it the first season or the second season? The likes of Ronaldo and Benzema and the big name players were not going away on the long journeys in La Liga. Whenever they played away and it required a flight to get there, they'd stay at home. They wouldn't even travel with the 18. And it's like, okay, this was like 6, 7, 8 games from about November through till April. These players were just given the weekend off. Ronaldo would go and spend a weekend on a yacht rather than go to, Real Sociedad away or somewhere like that. So, these are the kind of things that Zinedine Zidane was doing, but then delivering Champions League titles at the end of the season, because those players were, absolutely at their optimum level and felt indebted to the manager. And he basically just calibrated with how they felt every step of the way. And then when it came time to deliver, they delivered. So that's a completely different approach, completely contrary to everything that Solskjaer has built up. And I don't necessarily think that is the solution long term. I think United might find themselves back in some more problems in 3, 4 years down the line if they have a 2, 3 year tenure under Zidane. But in terms of, making the most of the assets that they've got now in Pogba and Ronaldo and trying to get trophies in the cabinet in the next 2 or 3 years, he might not actually be a bad bet.
I was having a very similar conversation with a United fan a few weeks ago as well. We pretty much also settled on Diego Simeone, but there were some calls for maybe Antonio Conte, but he does have history with another Premier League club. You mentioned that before. And again, similar to Zidane, it feels like a very short-term fix, Conte. He doesn't stay anywhere too long, does he?
Yeah, he's all in for a short period of time. There's possibly similarities here we were talking about Claudio Ranieri last week. And yeah, Conte's very much, I think there's a lot of similarities between Conte and Zidane. But like you said, I think Conte's just all in with the fire, the inner fire and drive initially. And I think it works brilliantly for a short period. But then the fire burns out eventually. I think it's hard for players to keep up the level of intensity that he has to go with your feelings. Which is not to say that tactically he's not very good and he's not very capable in terms of, but I think back to pre-Euro 2016, was it Italy? And he talks about building a war machine, and you can't sort of use that language and that's not sustainable for 4 or 5 years. It's short, sharp shocks. Is kind of his emotional mentality. So yeah, again, it's another shot. It depends how long United want to think now. I think they've got the club back on a stable footing. So they could potentially look at a 2-year period, 2 to 3 year period now. There's just an interim period while they look to make the next appointment, because we are talking about a world where Jurgen Klopp and Pep Guardiola are still going strong. Thomas Tuchel's now on the scene. So it's not like even you get the best manager in the world or one of the best managers in the world, like Simeone, success is not guaranteed in the next 2 or 3 years in any case. But you can get almost, think a little bit shorter term of a manager who in cup competitions, knockout competitions, could get United firing quite quickly. And the Champions League being the one, I think United as a club will believe that they've never won nearly enough Champions Leagues as a club. Tuchel came in at Chelsea for 6 months and suddenly the European champions. That can happen with the right appointment, and with some of the shorter term appointments like Conte or Zidane, that's distinctly possible even this season. So, it depends how United want to play it. I think the long term appointment, you're thinking more along the lines of Simeone and his cultural values. If you're thinking short term and just taking what you've got now, running with it and shooting for the stars in terms of Champions Leagues, FA Cups, things like that, then you're probably looking someone more like Conte or Zidane.